So veto session underway. One thing that they dealt with yesterday was a requirement for state vehicles to have zero emissions by 2030. Well, while we deal with that, you've got Congress not wanting to remove a vehicle monitoring and kill switch requirement that's set to take effect across the country by 2026. So that's what we're focusing on here. Let's first train our attention on the Illinois State House. State Senator Rachel Ventura, she brought forward a measure during the spring that requires state vehicles, so vehicles for state agencies, that people, state government, drive from location to location, be it somebody who's working for the Illinois Department of Revenue, or somebody who's working for a teacher's retirement system, or whatever. Whatever the agency they work for, DCFS, they got to get vehicles to go around. So they passed this, and it's all part of the governor's effort to try to bring about 1 million electric vehicles on Illinois roadways by 2030. So why not just have state government be mandated to do this? Now, there was discussion during the spring about making all governments do this, including local governments, but they took that out and they only made it to be the state government to be required to have zero emission or converted to zero emission vehicles by 2030. So they passed that in the spring. A trailer bill comes up to make sure it's clear who is exempt of the state vehicles being purchased that have to be either electric vehicle or zero emission. Here is State Senator Rachel Ventura.
Yes, so it's still all passenger vehicles procured by the state, except for law enforcement. Emergency vehicles will be removed by definition, and the IDOT Consolidated Vehicle Procurement Program.
So, all vehicles except for emergency vehicles, like law enforcement. State Senator Steve McClure, Republican from Springfield, he was asking questions about, just kind of delve a little bit more into really what's going on here with this bill.
As they purchase new vehicles after January 1st, 2030, they will need to purchase zero emissions vehicles or convert ones at new vehicles at that time.
Senator McClure.
Okay, so what is the cost going to be to the taxpayers of this state?
Senator Ventura.
I don't have that estimate, as it will be a rolling purchasing price. However, each vehicle stands to save $12,000.
So, not really sure what it's going to cost taxpayers to have this mandate. Interesting. Then you've got McClure making his point before the bill was ultimately called for a vote.
We are not a rich state financially. We don't even know how much this is going to cost. Second is that, as of now, this is essentially going to be money going to the biggest polluter in the world. And what are they going to do with that money as they produce these materials, these batteries? They are going to pollute the world even more.
Talking about China.
So this is really not an anti-pollution bill. It is an anti-taxpayer bill. And the fact that it doesn't take effect until 2030, when we don't know what the world's going to look like at that moment, should cause all of us to be concerned about why we would press the green button today. So
McClure, he goes on to discuss why he opposes this bill. We don't know the taxpayer costs. We don't even know if electric vehicles are going to be viable in 7 years, or maybe hydrogen vehicles will surpass electric vehicles. So clearly there are some legitimate concerns about all of this. But you had State Senator Chapin Rose then jump in with his questions of Senator Ventura about her bill requiring states agency vehicles have zero emissions by 2030, with the exception of a few. Here's Senator Rose.
Why are we letting anybody out? I mean, if the goal here is to be green and help the environment, why shouldn't the police cars be green?
So Ventura then is asked to address
Senator
that.
Ventura.
It is my opinion that they should also be green.
All right. Rose counters.
Senator Rose.
Then why aren't they in your bill?
Senator Ventura.
There was some discussion about the need for infrastructure in the southern part of our state. As you are aware, that our state has put millions of dollars into putting more infrastructure. In fact, they're looking at every 50 miles along our highways to have charging stations. And so in an effort to start moving this forward in our state, we cut law enforcement out for the moment, but I assure you I will take another bite at the apple.
Senator Rose.
No, I have no doubt about that latter part, but let me just say, aha, exactly. The point of the question, and I appreciate the honesty with which you answered it, but let me translate. The reason that the IEMA and ISP and the emergency vehicles aren't in this is because we can't guarantee they'd actually get where they're supposed to go. Why? Again, to the honesty of the sponsor. Because the infrastructure doesn't exist. The infrastructure doesn't exist. So let's go to the other vehicles that are in this, the passenger vehicles. Department of Corrections has multiple passenger vehicles as they transplant inmates around the state of Illinois. Are they exempt, or are they simply run out of electricity and sit on the side of the road?
So Ventura asked to address that. She then goes and kind of points to some of Rose's other points about infrastructure and doesn't really address the question of Department of Corrections vehicles and whether or not in rural areas, if they're transferring from one prison to another prison, you have to use a zero-emissions vehicle or an electric vehicle that could run out of juice and leave them with prisoners on the side of the road. Here is that back and forth.
I don't understand your question. This isn't a safety concern.
Senator Rose.
Well, I think you do understand my question, but never mind.
So, yeah, doesn't really get to the question. It says it's not really a safety concern. I think others would say that they wouldn't want a bus full of criminals broke down in their rural area because the electric vehicle couldn't make the trip. Senator Rose with some other arguments here.
So if you're moving inmates from Kankakee to Big Muddy and you run out of electricity, you're stuck on the side of the road. Universities, are they going to be able to go from UIC to Carbondale for a conference? I mean, look, folks, the exemptions that have been put into this expose the fallacy of the bill in the first place. This is nothing but another green press release to say we're doing something, and I guess, okay, we're going to have all these passenger cars that, go an hour and a half and stop. By the way, if you really want to go somewhere, get a hybrid. I have a hybrid. It's fantastic. I get like 500 miles on that sucker. I can get out of Illinois faster than you guys in Chicago can, because you'll be stuck on the side of the road in your green vehicle. Vote no.
So, Rose making some points there that, a little further discussion. You had State Senator Dave Kaler from Peoria, a Democrat. He supports this idea.
Hopefully this, as we see Stellantis build out its electric plant in Belvedere, we can convince Ford that they can start converting into electric cars. I think it's a good message to the electric automotive industry, and we should be leading by example. I'm going to vote yes on this.
So Kaler voting yes on this. The measure ultimately passed. And remember, the underlying bill already had passed. This was just cleanup language to deal with IDOT. And again, that gave them the opportunity to re-debate emergency vehicles not being included in this. Why? Well, because you can't necessarily charge a utility truck when there's a tornado that ripped through and knocked out the power plant. You can't necessarily charge a police vehicle who has to go and maintain order when the electric grid just got blown over, as Springfield had happen. Let alone there are concerns, civil liberties concerns. Individuals who are classical liberals, civil libertarians, who don't like the idea of these new vehicles with all of the technology, the tracking technology, and a lot of these electric vehicles have all of this. But apparently, the measure that passed over in the U.S. Congress, so now we're going from Illinois to the U.S. Congress, the measure that passed several years ago, the infrastructure bill or whatever, it included an element in there that by 2026, newly manufactured vehicles have to have a monitoring device to monitor the vehicle's performance, and also a device essentially to kill the vehicle, to stop it. Advocates say, hey, this is a measure to keep people from drunk driving. Opponents say this is Big Brother in a really bad way. And Thomas Massey, a Republican U.S. congressman from Kentucky in the U.S. House, earlier this week tried to get that particular part of the bill defunded and essentially done away with.
My amendment is simple. It will defund the federal mandate that requires all new vehicles after 2026 be equipped with a kill switch that can disable a vehicle if the vehicle has monitored the driver's performance and that the vehicle determines that the driver is not performing well. It's so incredible that I have to offer this amendment. It almost sounds like the domain of science fiction, dystopian science fiction, that the federal government would put a kill switch in vehicles that would be the judge, the jury, and the executioner on such a fundamental right as the right to travel freely. But here we are. It is federal law that this is mandated, and so I am offering this amendment to defund this mandate.
So Massey moves forward with this to try to get it defunded, but there's debate. You had a Illinois congressperson, Mike Quigley, give some of his time to Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who stood up and said, Massey's measure to defund the kill switch amendment is bad, and it only protects drunk drivers, she said.
We heard the same inane calls with seatbelt requirements, but you don't have a right to engage in potentially fatal behavior that we know poses a major health threat to public safety. Passive drunk driving technology is pro-police. This anti-drunk driving technology lightens the load on police officers, allowing them to focus on more pressing safety concerns. The importance of this technology goes far beyond statistics. It's about saving lives, preventing heartbreak, and making our roads safer. It's a passionate call to action to prevent alcohol-impaired driving from shattering the lives of those we hold dear.
So again, you had Debbie Wasserman Schultz there say, hey, we need this in here because it's about drunk driving. Massey pushed back on that.
Now the question is, how much time do you have once your dashboard tells you that it doesn't approve of your driving? What if you're a single mother and you're out in bad weather and you're trying to avoid some obstacles, ice perhaps, and you've swerved 3 times and your dashboard says, swerve 1 more time and you're going to be put over to the side of the road, that you'll have 100 yards to park this vehicle in the middle of nowhere with your children in the back seat. This isn't some fantastical scenario. This is what will happen if this is implemented.
So again, Massey making the argument that this level of what he might see as intrusion is dangerous and will leave a lot of people in a bad situation. But again, Democrats, they wanted to keep this measure in place, keep the vehicle monitoring system requirements and the kill switch requirement by 2026 for future vehicles being manufactured, to have those things in there. Illinois Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, she took to the podium to defend the monitoring and kill switch device.
You know, this technology has the potential of saving thousands of lives. And I don't see that you're agreeing that we should be saving those lives, and I would say we should all vote against the Drunk Driver Protection Act, and I yield back.
So again, Massey saying that nowhere in the law does it say it's monitoring blood alcohol content. Nowhere in the law does it say that it is monitoring drunk driving. It says something about impairment, but what exactly does that mean? Good question. Was my cat just behind me? Did anybody see? Anyways, she just ran off that way. Again, welcome to my house. But Massey says this the kill switch doesn't say anything about drunk driving. The kill switch just says a vehicle monitoring, vehicle performance monitor, and the ability to turn it off remotely. Think about that. There's as he said, a kind of science fiction Big Brother type of dystopian thing going on there. People have a lot of concerns that electric vehicles are ushering that in. Because then you'll have, how are you going to tax people? You can't tax them at the pump when they're getting gas. Well, how about we have a tax by mile? Okay. So you're going to start tracking Americans now everywhere they go? Then you're going to have, by 2026, a kill switch and a vehicle monitor in there to monitor the performance. Massey says this goes too far.
This is in the law. This will become law in 2026, every vehicle manufactured after that. And it's not about drunk driving. If it were, it would just be about blood alcohol content. This law has far more than that in it. It violates the Fourth Amendment. It violates so many amendments. It violates things that are so fundamental to our rights. They're not even in the Constitution, like the right to travel.
So Massey tried to get this ultimately stricken by not funding it, not funding the kill switch or the vehicle monitoring thing. And guess what? He failed to get enough votes to strip that from the bill. Pretty remarkable. All right. That's your show for this Thursday. We'll be back tomorrow. Greatly appreciate everybody tuning in. Got to get out of here and head out to the Illinois State Capitol for the final day of fall veto session. Have yourselves a wonderful rest of the day. And be sure to like, subscribe, follow, hit the notification bell. Find me on X, formerly known as Twitter. Find me on Facebook. Find me on Twitter or YouTube or Rumble, or just search Bishop on Air and you'll be able to find me. Email me, bishoponair@gmail.com. Have a great day, guys.